Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. My guest today is Carrie Hoffman. Carrie, how are you this morning?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you. Yeah, I've been looking forward to our talk. It sounds like you got a lot of very interesting and cool stuff going on. Yeah, let's start with that. Let's do a little bit of reverse engineering. What do you have going on right now?
Well, right now it's kind of my off season for my business. So I am traveling through Mexico, which with my husband, which is
Very cool.
amazing.
Yes.
But what we do in our busy season is run yoga and adventure retreats that have a focus on recovery and healing and sustainability and all those good things.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I can't wait to talk about this. So, okay, and then you're doing some little off-season traveling. What better thing to do than do some traveling, right? And stay somewhere nice and warm during the winter.
Totally. I know there's like a meter of snow at home where our home base is in northern
Yeah.
Arizona right now. So it's just so
Oh,
lovely to be like sitting outside in a tank top with all the
yeah.
birds and the sun.
Oh, that's tremendous. So Arizona, I thought Arizona was fairly snow exempt. Apparently not.
Apparently not. Yeah, most people think that. Most people think of like Phoenix, southern Arizona
Oh,
when they think of
okay.
Arizona, but
Sure.
we are up in the north, close to the Grand Canyon, which is at about 7,000 feet elevation. So it's much more mountainous, very seasonal. We get a ton of snow. This winter has
Oh,
been a really heavy winter up there, so it's a good time to escape.
that's right. Yes, good. Yeah, yeah, good, good. Yeah, you made your escape plan. How long have you been doing the retreats, and how long have you been doing like the going south for the winter?
So we started doing the retreats in 2018, so about 5 years ago now. Um, but just started really in the last few years, having enough resources to take more time off in the winter and travel more in the winter. And we love Mexico, Central America, Latin America in general. So last year we drove ourselves all the way from our home in northern Arizona to Oaxaca, Mexico, and that
Wow.
was a great adventure. And this year we just kind of decided to start where we left off last year. So we started in Oaxaca and have traveled through a lot of new states and headed to Belize tomorrow, which will be a new country for both of us.
Oh, so cool. I'm glad I'm catching you guys like right on like the eve of you leaving for this adventure. So you guys are living the adventure lifestyle that you were also like helping facilitate back in Arizona. It sounds like you were definitely living the adventure life.
Yeah, trying to. I mean, I've been passionate about travel for a long, long time, pretty much ever since I got my first taste of travel and adventure. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I'm just really, really fortunate and blessed and also work really hard to make it a part of our lives on the regular.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And just for people listening at home, I'm trying something different today. I mentioned this before we got started. I want to give like some of your, social media links or websites. So if people are listening, like, oh, this is intriguing, they can look you up right away instead of leaving it for the end of the episode. So where can people find you online as far as like social media? What's the easiest way to get a hold of you?
Sure. So social media, I'm on Bigger Life Adventures on Instagram, and that's primarily what I use, but the same handle on Facebook. And then our website is just biggerlifeadventures.com. So you'll find all our retreats there. And then if you're also interested in checking out our home base in Northern Arizona that I mentioned, that is on Instagram at Grand Canyon Eco Retreat.
Okay, yeah, I remember looking that one up as well. I'm giving that one a follow.
Mhm.
So very, very cool stuff. I'm actually headed
So
to
that's the
Arizona.
home base.
That's the home base. Okay, very
Yep.
cool, very cool. So highly recommend to follow. I love the whole branding, as you can imagine from like the whole Beyond Recovery thing. Like my graphic on my cover is all about like, getting out into nature and the whole like idea of like mountains and like the summiting the mountain of your own recovery and so forth. So definitely really ties in with the theme of like my modality of recovery as well, like what's worked for me. So I love this tie-in. So I want to get back to you and your origin story though. So like I'd love to roll back the clock and give you an opportunity to go back as far in your life as you care to go, as far as just what your relationship was with whatever substances showed up as addictive and compulsive behaviors for yourself. And like let's just walk into that and then we can get into where the shift in your life happened from there.
Sure, totally. So, okay, let's see. How far back do I go?
Right?
Um,
Yes.
there's so much I could say, but
Yeah.
I'll just start, I guess, with, my upbringing was in the Midwest in the United States, and fairly typical, traditional, normal childhood, I would say. I was raised like in a pretty religious household, so that was a big part of my life. I was raised going to like evangelical Christian churches from birth, and I was the oldest kid in my family, so just, pretty normal, like doing my thing, going through life, trying to be a good kid. And I really did, believe in God and Jesus and all these things that I was being taught about. Like all through high school, up until I went to college, which I feel like is a pretty common age to sort of start questioning things. And so once I did graduate high school and go to college, I moved to New York because I was really into being closer to the city. Sorry, there's like a dog barking in the background. I don't know if that's bothersome.
That's I can hear a little bit of I would honestly have never been able to guess it was a dog. There's a little bit of like clicking, but
Okay.
it's all good. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I'll just keep going then.
Yeah.
So yeah, moved to New York for college because even though I had always lived in these kind of like suburban Midwestern environments, I had this urge to like be in the city. I had visited before, and I always like loved the energy and the hecticness and kind of like the intensity of the big city. And I also was really into the arts, into theater and filmmaking. So that definitely led me to move from Ohio to New York for college. And so I did that. And that's kind of where I started drinking, as people often do. So I didn't start in high school or anything. I was like your typical straight A, good kid student all through those years. But as soon as I got to college, it's like people are partying and you get curious and you're just like, yeah, I don't really know if this is like as bad as everyone has told me it is, so I'm going to check it out and experiment for myself. Um and that's what I did. So just, started partying, started drinking with friends in college, and it's so normalized in that environment, especially when you're living in dorms and just like it seems like everybody around you is doing it. um, so at that time, it kind of coincided with also questioning like the religion that I had grown
Mm.
up with. Just being exposed to like different people, more diverse people, different backgrounds, and then also like going out and partying and drinking and not really feeling like it was this horrible evil thing that I had been taught that it was as a child. I i basically started stepping away from believing in that religion that I was raised with. Didn't really like believe in anything anymore in those years, but at the same time I was still like getting A's in my classes, like being successful, just doing like the normal college party thing. Um and so that continued, and let's see, after college, I joined the Peace Corps. So my travel bug was a big part of what motivated me to do that. I had this desire to really go and live somewhere exotic and remote and hopefully do something good for the world, do something altruistic. I would say at age 22, my idea of like what the Peace Corps would be was pretty romanticized. But I did do that. So I moved to Tanzania
Mm.
and went through the whole Peace Corps training. And yeah, that environment, interestingly enough, was also kind of like a breeding ground for drinking as a coping mechanism, at
Hmm.
least in my experience.
Yeah.
Because it's like you take all these recent college graduates, at least a majority of the people in my Peace Corps class were like in their early to mid 20s. You throw them into this new country where they have to learn a new language.
Mm,
learn a new job that they have no experience with. Like most of us have no experience with how to get things done in a very like bureaucratic and untechnological society.
right.
and then and then like basically you put us all in training together, which lasted for about 2 months. So like that part was fine and fun and like we got to see each other. But then after the training, you're all just like plopped down into different villages.
Mm,
Um, so I was plopped in this village that was like just it was in the middle of nowhere. No
mm,
power, no running water. Um, all, very remote, very rustic. There was like this was back in 2009, so I know that things have changed a lot since then, but at that time I did have a cell phone, but to get service in my village, I had to like go to this one spot and hold my cell phone like super high in the air. And I could maybe get like 1 bar of service to get a
wow.
text message or something. So I felt obviously so lonely and isolated and disconnected in that environment. And I was trying to like do my work and make community connections, and the people in my village really took me in and were so wonderful and just like so loving and helpful. But I just was like feeling so isolated, being the only foreigner in such a drastically different environment where like nobody understood um, my culture at all. Like nobody in
Mm,
my village could understand that I was like really lonely and I really missed this guy I had met 3 months before leaving, who, spoiler alert, now my husband. But
mm,
I couldn't really explain that to like my neighbors, like, oh, I'm just like sad because I want to be here, but I also like miss this person.
yeah.
And yeah, along with all of these feelings, there was a Peace Corps tradition, which was passed down from some volunteers to the next, of how to make homemade wine in buckets.
Mm, okay. Can see where this is
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So that happened a lot.
Yeah.
Um, and, we would like visit each other, the other volunteers, because that was a good way to like stay sane, was to travel around and like go visit other people. And we would always drink and party a lot. And so I would say during Peace Corps was a time in my life where the drinking definitely became more of a coping mechanism to cope with like depression and isolation that I was feeling.
Mm,
And I also didn't really have anyone around to like check me on it,
yeah.
because it wasn't socially acceptable to drink for a woman to drink in public in my village. So I
Mm,
didn't do that. But I would like drink by myself in my house from my bucket of like banana wine, and
mm,
just nobody would know about it.
right. Yeah.
So,
There's
yeah.
there's a lot of relatable things to that. Yeah, interesting too is like to look back and it's, I found a lot of people that get curious like in high school. So I find it interesting that it's like, it was just a little bit later for you, right? From just the way by what I'm gathering, the way you were raised and such, right? There's some religion and like you're a really good student. And then so there was also like this sort of like idea that it was forbidden and such. So, you did get to it in, like you mentioned, in your college years. I also find it interesting too that there's somebody that's so into like nature and all that. The initial interest that you had was moving to a big city, right? So it seems like there's a bit of a duality there. You like you big city.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure how you are with big cities now, but definitely at one point you liked, there was the duality of the nature and then also being in a like really busy hustle bustle city too, right?
Yeah, totally. I've noticed that about myself, and I still like both. Yeah, it is weird,
Interesting.
like I went from big city New York for college to this village in the middle of Tanzania. So like those two
Right.
extremes. Basically, the only conclusion I've come to about myself with that is that I just don't like the suburbs, which is where I was raised.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of like in that gray area, sort of in between. There's the, not as much going
Yeah.
on, a little bit quieter. Yeah, I could see that. I could see that. Yeah, interesting stuff. And then so you're basically saying, or like when you can reflect back on it, very much a coping mechanism. Like you had mentioned, you painted the picture, very lonely. You had somebody at home that you had become very interested in. Obviously a culture shock to say the least. So, the buckets of wine were there to help you cope with some of these things that were coming up. So yeah, take us from there. When did you come to the conclusion, okay, this isn't serving me anymore? And were you able to pivot from that, or was there still some more lessons to be learned with alcohol?
So there were quite a few more lessons to be learned along the way after that. Um, so to fast forward a little bit, basically, I did eventually come home from the Peace Corps and reconnected with Zach, who was the guy I had mentioned that I was missing when I was over there. Um, so he's now my husband, but when I got home, we basically just reconnected, started a relationship, and what really bonded us in our relationship was just being drinking buddies for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
We had other things in common, of course. We, had this kind of instant like attraction to each other from the time we first met. We had a lot of commonalities in like the way we were raised, but we were both just like really into just drinking and partying with our friends and like living that kind of life. So once we got together, the next several years basically consisted of working in the service industry. Working in the service industry. So I would work like server or bartender jobs usually. And then Zach became a chef. So Zach was usually like in the kitchen, working in restaurants. And living that lifestyle has a lot of perks because it's really easy to like make money fast,
Mm,
especially making tips, at least how it was back then in the United States. And then it's easy to like save a bunch of money up and then quit your job and go traveling.
right.
So we got to do that. I definitely infected him with the travel bug. I think like when we first, were like, okay, let's do this, like let's be together. We were both kind of aimless. I had just come home from the Peace Corps. He had just dropped out of college. We were like, what are we doing? We're like, well, do you want to save a bunch of money and go to South America? I don't even remember whose idea it was, but we we agreed on this idea. So that's what we did. So over, probably the first like 10 years of our relationship, we did this many times where we would work for a couple years, like save a bunch of money up and then quit our jobs, like put our stuff in storage or something, and then go backpack South America or backpack through Europe, different things like this. And that was like really fun in a lot of ways, but there was also a lot of drinking involved. Um, we moved to San Diego, California eventually, which is definitely a big party town. It's a big
Mm,
like craft beer scene and restaurant scene. So we were very involved in that and all the like culture of like having to always go to the new brewery or like go to the new restaurant and like do all of that stuff. Um, so both of us were pretty similar in our drinking habits, but basically for me, it eventually started to get pretty destructive before it did for him.
mm,
Um,
mhm.
and so what happened is just, I feel like things that I could justify at the time, but in hindsight, I look back and see that they were all red flags. I would
Ah,
black out a lot from drinking.
mhm.
Um, I would wake up the next morning and not know like where my phone was or like who I had talked to or if I had like gotten in a fight with Zach, my husband. We eventually got married during this time also. Um, and like people would have to fill me in on things that had happened when I was blacked out. I would start having like a lot of trouble sleeping and just like wake up, once the alcohol wore off with that like
Mm,
horrible anxious feeling and
mm.
like not being able to sleep anymore. And my hangovers got so bad that I would just like drink in the morning in order to, make the feeling of the hangover and that anxiety go away a little bit. Um, I would like occasionally use other drugs too, but alcohol was always my primary thing. That was definitely my substance of choice, and like anything else that I dabbled around with or took would just be like so I could keep drinking, or so I could keep the party going, or so I could go to sleep, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that. I was yeah, Susie mentioned like the drinking in the morning to like help the hangover. Yeah, I was a big that was a big proponent of my drinking career for sure. So I definitely relate to that. Yeah, the culture, right? Depending on like what you do for a profession. I've talked to quite a few people that have been in like restaurant industry, and I played in a band, so one of the only jobs you're like sort of encouraged to drink on the job, you know what I mean? So it's like that whole culture, the nightlife and such. Yeah, very much you can fall through the cracks, so to speak. You can definitely pull it off, and like you say, the justifications that you can come up with for it for sure. So yeah, interesting. And there's another parallel just with yours and Zach's story. Like my wife Darcy and I were big time the party couple for like years, right? So I'm very intrigued to see how this plays out with how both of you were able to stay together and become sober, and what kind of timeline did you do it together and so forth. So yeah, I'm kind of curious to see where it goes from here, your story.
Yeah, so basically, like I said, all of these consequences were kind of building up and piling up. I did have a DUI one time, and unfortunately, that didn't even get me to quit right away. It took like a few more years through going through all the legal consequences from the DUI before I actually had my rock bottom, which I do consider it a rock bottom because it was really bad. And I thankfully did quit after that. Um, but basically, in August of 2016, I was having all these consequences, all these bad mental health symptoms, anxiety, depression, just feeling like everything was out of control because it was. However, on the surface, I still had everything together. I had a management job. I had my own business as well. I was doing like wedding photography on the side.
Mhm.
Um, and nobody really knew like how bad it was except for my husband, except for maybe like one friend. And I had tried to take breaks from drinking. I had like read self-help books and tried to take breaks for like a month or something, and I would convince myself after taking a break that everything was going to be fine, that I was going to be able to moderate, and that was just never the case.
Mm.
So eventually my rock bottom happened. I just like got blacked out drunk before a work responsibility, made a fool of myself, didn't do my job properly, and woke up the next morning just basically with that horrible feeling in the pit of my stomach of like, the jig is up. Like, I can't pretend anymore. Like,
Right.
I messed everything up so badly that I just have to like do something different. And I can't explain this away to like my boss or
Right.
other people who were involved anymore. And honestly, looking back now, I'm grateful that I couldn't hide it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that that happened because for me it wasn't like being homeless, it wasn't you know like heroin, it wasn't living in my car or any of these things, but it was just like that was the level of shame and humiliation that I needed to actually stop.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's so common, right? And obviously people's ideas of rock bottom are very different, right? And it's like that moment of you're so disturbed that there's, like you say, the gig is up, the jig is up. It's like, yeah, there's no more work, no more wiggle room. You can't explain this one, right? And yeah, so
right.
it's straight. It's curious to think that like the majority of people have this in their head that like, and I'm myself included, I had this, as long as I'm not the guy behind the store with a brown paper bag that's homeless, I'm fine. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not, as long as I don't get down to that level of, yeah, like I was able to continue to justify different things to me. So the same thing with you is like you're mentioning, well, I'm not like living out of my car or this or that, right? But there was definitely enough of this, energy that you know, I always liken it to like, I got so many taps on the shoulder from the universe to stop and some gentle reminders. And then finally it was like a whack on the back of the head. It was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I get you. I get you. Right. So it sounds like of similar, similar nature for yourself.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
relate to that. It definitely felt like a slap in the face or something from the universe. And
Right.
just, having like gone through those phases where I would try to quit or try to moderate, it finally felt like I had tried everything and quitting was the only option at this
Wow.
time.
Yeah. That's powerful.
So, yeah. So the only thing I knew to do in 2016 was to call a friend who had gotten sober a year before I did. And
Mm.
she and I used to drink together. So when she quit drinking, our friendship had become kind of strained, obviously, because I was still, partying and drinking. But she had quit. She had been sober for like over a year. She had kind of given me some gentle nudges, over that year of like, it's available if you ever want to change. And so I called her finally, like feeling super shameful and defeated. And she told me what meetings to go to. So I didn't go to rehab or anything. I worked it out with my job. I didn't get fired, but I told them what was going on. I told them I was going to quit drinking. And I started going to 12-step meetings. And I did the thing. I got a sponsor. I did the steps. Did all of that stuff for a while, and slowly but surely, started to feel like maybe I could actually have a good life without drinking. Because at that moment of rock bottom, when I knew I had to quit, I just thought I was going to be destined to have like a boring, sad life for the rest of my
Mm.
life
Oh,
without
wow.
alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? Right. I mean, yeah, there was like, yeah, for me, I thought it was going to be disappointing so many people. Like, oh, like I'm going to like, it's be such a letdown. They're so used to like the, party mat. I'm like, oh, they're going to be so disappointed in me. Like, in fact, it was like the opposite, right? I don't know if you found this, but I found
Right.
it a lot of times it was the opposite reaction when I thought work would just discard of me and, oh, you loser. And, and it was in fact the opposite. They supported me and like, in fact, encouraged me to take, 5 weeks off, and I got like paid the majority of my salary. Right. And everybody was supportive. I thought it was going to be this disappointment to the family. Again, the opposite. Everybody like rallied around me, and so I was like, isn't it interesting though? Like, I think it's that wounded addict or drinker mindset that thinks it's going to be this way, and it ends up being like the opposite, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I relate to that. Yeah, I thought that I was just gonna have like such a boring, lame life without drinking or without my party friends. And luckily for me, I seemed to find out pretty quickly that sobriety just opened up all these different options. And I did lose a lot of friends, but the friends that I lost were the ones that were just the party friends. And then
Mm.
I ended up gaining this whole new community of friends who were people that like I realized actually had interests in common with me. So I remember like my first year sober, me and like these three other ladies from 12 step would go to the climbing gym at 6 a.m. before work twice a week. And I
Cool.
just remember feeling like so proud of myself that I could
Yeah.
even do that, because
Right.
before, getting up that early to like go to the gym with friends and keep a commitment like that would have been completely impossible for me.
Yeah. I often say that too, is like mornings used to be my least favorite time of day for obvious reasons, and now it's like hands down my favorite. Are you finding that as well? Are you loving
Oh
mornings?
yeah.
Yeah.
I am such a morning person.
Yeah.
And I tell my friends nowadays that I need a week's notice if they want me to be out past 8 p.m.
Right?
because I love
Yeah.
my sleep and I love
Yes.
getting up early. And
Yeah.
yeah, I do a ton of running, climbing, outdoor stuff nowadays. So like
Yeah.
early morning starts are where it's at.
Hell yeah, absolutely. The golden hour, like you get that sun. I find myself the most creative and most just like open to everything in the morning, and sort of wears down. I become more easily distracted as the day progresses, right? And yeah, it's funny you mentioned that too, because same thing for me. Like if there's anything beyond, yeah, like 7 to 8 is sort of my last time slot where I'll go to jujitsu or something. And then after 8, I'm like, I'm going home. Like, of course it changes a little bit for like in summertime where it's lighter later and such. But generally speaking, I'm the same way. Whereas before it was the opposite, like 8 PM is like warm up time, you know, for the rest of the night. So yeah, it's so funny how things shift like that. Right. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, totally.
So 2016, that was when is your like, or do you have an official, like, you know what I mean, sober birthday, or was it just
Yeah, I do. So
cool?
so weirdly enough, it happens to be August 8th of 2016, and the
Okay.
8 was always my lucky number in life.
Very
Not that I
cool.
planned this.
Right.
Yeah.
So 8th month, 8th day. Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yep.
Okay, very cool.
hmm
Very cool. So now you're coming up on, oh, my math is bad. So 7, is it
I'm
7
about, yeah, so
six
about
and a
six and
half?
a half years
6.5.
now.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Congratulations. That's amazing.
Oh, thank you.
So, and then it was 2018 where you guys, you and your husband began. Oh, and so I guess I take out the, I guess we should, when was Zach? When did Zach start sobering up? Was it alongside you to support you? What was his sober story? Just out of curiosity.
Oh, yeah. So he's open about this too. So
Okay, cool.
I'll share. Yeah, that was really hard. I would say definitely the hardest thing, other than just what's commonly hard in early sobriety, you know, figuring out who you actually are. Other than that, the hardest thing I would say was our relationship after I
Mm,
quit drinking. Because, you know, I had had the most obvious problems with it. So obviously I had to quit, but he didn't feel that he had to quit or didn't feel ready to quit.
right.
Um, so there we are now on very different pages in a marriage that really started off bonding over drinking and partying, and I have quit doing that and he hasn't. And he was running a food truck at the time, so they were going to
Mm,
breweries and stuff, and there was a lot of like alcohol and marijuana use just every day with him and going to work. And
yeah.
I'm trying to like go to meetings and meet new people and just like slowly feeling better about myself and changing, but feeling worse and worse about our relationship as this process is evolving. And so, yeah, I would say like not too long after I quit drinking, the conversations between us about his use started happening.
Mm,
And
mhm.
you know, obviously I knew at the time like I can't force it, I can't change him. However, without my mess happening anymore, his mess kind of started to become more obvious.
Right.
Um
Sure.
yeah, so that was really hard and we had a lot of disagreements about it. We had a lot of really difficult discussions about whether or not our relationship was going to survive this. And you know, I had a lot of good friends tell me multiple times that I should give up and leave. And I definitely considered it, but I just never had that like final push to like finalize it.
Mm,
I kept thinking like give it more time, maybe he'll get there, give it another chance. And he started kind of doing the same thing I would do, like taking breaks or
mm,
like
mhm,
trying to moderate or
mhm.
making deals with me like okay, like I won't do this, or like okay, I'll like drink but I won't lie to you about it, or I'll not drink, or you know, all that like negotiation that happens.
Yeah.
And you know, I saw that happening and I recognized the process that I had been through in that. So I still had this hope that like he would eventually get there. And throughout this time, I was getting really deeply back into my yoga practice and just going to a lot of classes and doing more meditation. And I feel like for me, when I'm like meditating or when I'm in nature is usually when I get more of those like downloads, those little
Mm,
messages from the universe or from God or however you define it, that
mhm.
just seem to like come from somewhere else. And sounds pretty weird, I know, but one of those messages I got one day was just I was lying in shavasana, like in the resting pose after a yoga class, and I just
Mhm.
in my head from nowhere came the message, "You and Zach are going to help people someday."
Hmm. It's
And I
amazing.
was like, "What?"
Yeah, you're like, what do you mean? Yeah,
Yeah,
who's talking to me right now? Yeah.
right. I know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah. That's so cool though. I
Um,
like I've had that happen before too. So I'm sure there's people that can relate to that, especially in like our, line of I'd say work, but service, like within the recovery for sure. There's moments like that for people. So not as weird as you would think. I don't think. Cool,
Right.
cool. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt, but
Oh yeah, no, for sure. And then um another thing that happened, like another one of those like interesting little downloads or intuitions, a few, like, I don't know, maybe 6 months later when we were still struggling, like it was not resolved at all, was just like give it another year. I just somehow had
mm,
this clarity of like give it another year.
hmm
So that put the time frame around when I reached 2 years of sobriety. And interestingly enough, that was when he really started trying
hmm.
to quit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, 2 years, I imagine that would have been just a lot of different challenges, right? And like it's the whole extra dynamic for yourself, finding yourself, and and then having a partner that's on a different journey, and you to be able to acknowledge that, and still, yeah, like you navigate that with like, it is triggering behavior, I imagine, for you, right? It's still there are parts of the 2 years that I'm sure that were button pushers as far as like, maybe it would be easier just to go back or things of that nature. I imagine that came up for you, right?
Oh yeah, totally. It was super hard, and I think that the only advice I ever have for anyone in a similar situation is that you just have to listen to your intuition, because I had lots of advice coming at me from all different
Sure,
places,
sure.
but I don't think that anyone can actually understand what it's like to be in that situation, to be married and to have like such a hard, like grave decision in front of you,
Yeah, right.
unless they're in it. They can't
Yeah,
possibly understand it. So I
yeah.
think that luckily, super lucky for us, like we're probably the exception to the rule in that he did eventually also get sober and we made it.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know a lot of other couples who have had that same trajectory, but I'm super, super, um, grateful that it did eventually happen for us. So now he's about like over 4 years sober, and
Yeah.
our relationship
Oh, you froze up.
without its challenges. Oh,
Oh, there we go. We're good. We're good. Just for like 2 seconds, it froze up. It's all good now.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say life is not without its challenges, but
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
we're on the same page now and it's super good.
Yeah, I think that's the key, right? I imagine is like the fact that you're on the same page now is yeah,
Hmm.
because yeah, for sure. When you're on two different or like different pages, I mean, for a couple of years, like who knows, right? How long it could last beyond that, So, but yeah, kudos to both of you for being able to do that. It's quite the story. Because as you mentioned, it's certainly not the norm. There's a lot of relationships where one person is well ahead of the other person for whatever reason it may be for the recovery, and it just it doesn't work out, and like you say, yeah, absolutely, there's gonna be people in your ear. So I love that as advice, very real advice. Follow your intuition, because you were living it every day and not everybody else was. And I think it's friends nature to, like, if they see that you're in pain about it, they're going to want to, like, well, you should get out of there then, like encouraging you to get out of that painful situation, not realizing that in behind the scenes there's just so much more depth and nuance than anybody could ever possibly see, right? If they're only seeing you a couple hours at a time versus living with you, right?
Right. Totally.
Yeah, cool, cool. So okay, so then we got your guys' sober stories. 2018 is when Zach did that as well, and out of that became this work that you guys are doing now. So that download that you got in Shavasana, laying in the woods or whatever it was there, came to be, right? It's so you guys are
Yeah.
helping people. So tell us about that. When did this start? Yeah, what were like the beginnings of of this company that you guys have been running, and how have things been going over the last 5 years? Very curious to see how it went with COVID, if how that affected it.
Yeah. Good questions. So our business is called Bigger Life Adventures, and we do yoga and adventure retreats in different destinations around the United States and the whole world now, with a focus on recovery and healing. So they're not just for people in recovery from addiction, because I really believe that everyone is recovering from something, whether it's, past trauma, eating disorders, just the stress of life, the rat race, what have you.
Yeah.
So our retreats are open to anyone who just feels pulled to come and feels like they could benefit from them. All the retreats are always a sober experience, because unfortunately, some other yoga retreats that exist out there in the world are not. um,
Yeah.
and we also give scholarships to people who might really want to come but not financially be able to do it on their own. So, how we started doing this, we we moved to Thailand, interestingly
Mm.
enough,
Mm-hmm.
when I was about a year sober. So this
Mm-hmm.
was during that 2 year period of lots of um, bumps in the road. Yeah, you take yourself with you when you move somewhere, in case you didn't know that. But
Right.
we did we did move to Thailand.
Yeah.
I got a work opportunity in Bangkok, and this was something that we had always talked about doing. We had always talked about like living overseas again and working overseas, and not just doing it like as backpackers or as travelers, but actually like living somewhere in a more sustainable way. So this opportunity came for me, and I really wanted to jump on it. And Zach was just kind of along for the ride. He was like, okay, I'll figure something out. Um, so,
Yeah.
so we packed up our home, got rid of everything in San Diego, moved to Thailand, and I was working. Zach was kind of doing some like freelance internet type work, trying to figure it out. Times were still hard, but we were in an exciting new country, so that was good.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
um, I was also signed up for my yoga teacher training, which was like a big dream that I had had. So during this time, we had gone on a trip with a friend of ours. She's still friends with us. I always tell this story and give her credit for a lot of why we started this business.
Mm.
Um, but we went on this little like trip across the border to Cambodia to visit the temples of Angkor Wat. So it was me, Zach, and this friend. And at the time, I was the only sober one. Zach was like off and on, sober, not sober. And this friend was very sober curious. She definitely fell
Mm.
into that category. So
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of conversations about sobriety during that time when we all lived in Bangkok. So the three of us are on this trip, and we're just talking and chatting about like what are we going to do, like we need something that's like a little bit more purposeful. Like we've always wanted to kind of have our own business. We've flirted with that in the past. And our friend just said, you guys should just do yoga retreats, because Carrie, you're going to be a yoga teacher. Zach, you're a chef. You guys have tons of travel experience. You're really organized. You could definitely do this. You should do it. And when she said this, I just immediately had like imposter syndrome. I was like, no way, I can't do that. Like, there's already so many people doing that. Like, why would anyone come with us on a yoga retreat? And she was like, I don't know. I just think you'd be great at it. So we had that conversation. The seed was planted. I think about 4 days later, I was like, we're doing it. We're doing it with a focus on recovery. The name is going to be Bigger Life Adventures. And we started a website, and that was the
Wow.
beginning.
That's so cool. I love how it's like the same name and just like yeah, one of these people that just you say, I'm sure like there's something, you had the energy, you had the wherewithal to do it. You just needed that friendly nudge, and whether that was that person was touched to tell you that day, or sure seems like it, right?
Right.
Yeah, very cool. Wow, very cool origin story. And then yeah, so then you
Yeah.
you started, and how was it starting out? Like, did you get like you had the website where you getting people like interested right off the bat, or was it the usual, 2 years, the first 2 years, a little bit touch and go? Like, how was it for you guys?
Oh yeah, it was definitely touch and go for a while. And we knew it would be, and we learned a lot, by making mistakes. And that's one
Mm,
thing that I'm pretty proud of just in life in general, is that I have never really been like afraid to try something big. I've never really been afraid to fail.
mm,
Um, and I've learned a lot through those failures and through those mistakes along the way. So we eventually just decided our first retreat would be like a small little camp out retreat at this mountain in Southern California, because that's where most of our friends were. And we like begged our friends to come. It was our first one. We had
Yeah.
no testimonials, we had no
Right.
credibility. So we were like, just come, friends. I promise it'll be fun.
Right.
And
Right.
it was, luckily. And we had a mix of friends, and we had some people who actually did find it online and just sign up.
Cool.
um, so that was the first retreat, and it went really well, and we got a lot of really good feedback, learned a lot. And ever since then, it's just been kind of like a slow organic progression. So I think the next year in 2019, we did maybe three retreats. And we also bought our property in Northern Arizona in
Mm,
2019. So that's
cool.
now our home base where we host a lot of them. So that was a big step.
Yeah.
And yeah, you asked about the pandemic, 2020. It
Hmm.
was it was an interesting time. We were really scared, of course, when it first hit, like how is
Yeah.
this gonna affect our business? We had a lot of cancellations for just like the Airbnb vacation rental units that we also have on our property there in
Right.
Arizona.
Hmm.
But what actually ended up happening is that because our retreats are so nature based, and because almost everything we do is outside, we actually ended up like having business boom that year.
Oh,
And I think it
cool.
was because people had to cancel their international trips, or they
Right.
wanted to travel, but they didn't want to stay in a hotel.
Yeah.
So they found us doing these more like nature based,
Hmm.
outdoor oriented retreats, with precautions like wearing
Yeah.
masks in the van and everything like that.
Yeah.
And people still came. So I think in 2020, we had to postpone one of our retreats. Like
Hmm.
we postponed it like 6 months later. Um, and that was the only thing that we ever really had to change. Everything else just kept going.
That's so cool. Like I know like I'm up in Canada and honestly there was like this that was like the main go around for people with COVID was like camping. So all of a sudden like everybody was a camper. So that's what I was kind of thinking. I'm like, I wonder if this actually worked out well for you. And it sounds like it very much did. So very
It
cool.
did.
It's like a lot of startup businesses, like whew, there's a graveyard, of businesses that were just starting out or attempting in 2019, 2020. And it's just like it laid waste to a lot of people's dreams. And conversely, worked to some people's benefits and really, people were able to weather the storm and stuff. So a lot of different stories, the whole great resignation, people getting, tired of their desk jobs and such happened during COVID as well. So very interesting time. So yeah, definitely thanks for sharing that side of it. So yeah, what are the plans for 2023 for you guys? What's coming up? You're down in Mexico, as you mentioned. When are you going back to Arizona? When is the next retreat? If somebody's listening to this and interested to reach out to you.
So the next retreat we have coming up is in the middle of March in Costa Rica.
Ooh,
So that's a little bit of the reason why we're down in Mexico now. Also, last year and this year, we have just decided to kind of slowly make our way south towards Costa Rica for that retreat, since it's
cool.
the first one that we do every year. Um, so that one will happen in March, and then it's kind of full on from there. um, we do a Joshua Tree retreat in April
Cool.
with
Yeah,
like yoga and rock climbing adventures,
cool.
and we do a Catalina island yoga and backpacking retreat at the
Cool.
end of April. So
Okay.
that's coming up. Our season in Arizona starts in May, so we start doing stuff in Arizona like May through September, because that's the good weather window up in the mountains where we are.
Right, right. That's
Yeah.
awesome. And then do things start winding down in September, or do you do a few more before you start doing the Mexico winter thing?
We have a few more. So every year, as more and more people start knowing about us, luckily we get to kind of add more things.
Right.
And we've also had a lot of destinations that have kind of been on the list ever since the pandemic, because travel was locked
Yes,
down for a while.
for sure.
So So yeah, Arizona wraps up around September, but we still do another one in Colorado.
Cool.
We go to Baja, northern Baja, Mexico in the
Cool.
fall, planning like a Vegas area desert getaway for the fall.
Mm,
And then in November this year, for the first time ever, Thailand.
wow.
So
Okay.
the place where it all began.
Yeah, isn't that cool? Full circle. Yeah, I love this. I love it. So I'm so very happy for you guys. I mean, just getting a really good vibe from you today. I really appreciate you coming on, just with the honesty, and to me, it's like when I hear somebody's story too, it just gives like their business and what you're doing so much more depth and so forth. So I'm glad that we got to jump into your personal story and then how that led into the work that you're doing right now, which sounds just amazing. So I really thank you for coming on today, Carrie. So Carrie, bigger life adventures, just as a wrap here, is there anything that you would like to say as far as, I think the sober curious thing is a big thing right now. And people that are like, you know what I mean, hearing this whole idea of adventure, but they're not quite ready, to jump off the cliff and see if they can fly. Yeah. What kind of advice do you have for people that are like hearing this and it's resonating with them, but they aren't quite feeling like they're ready yet?
I would say just come on a retreat. Just try something new. It's it's normal to be a little bit anxious about something that's out of your comfort zone, but I really believe that that is where the growth is for all of us in like seeking out those new experiences that get us out of our comfort zones. And that's why we created Bigger Life Adventures, is to really just help people do that, to help people grow, to help people find like-minded community. And it's just a combination of all these things that have helped Zach and I heal and recover over the years, So, like nature, adventure, mindfulness, and connection with other amazing people. So, I'm so
Mm.
proud of the community that we have now. And I'm proud that a lot of people come back over and over again. And I just can't wait to like bring more people into the family.
Oh, that's awesome. So you guys have a lot of like repeat clients then, it sounds like.
We
Oh,
do.
that's so
Yeah,
cool. Okay, so you really
it
are,
is.
yeah, getting like a community and yeah, a real way to, because yeah, the way I thought is like, especially retreats, I've always thought it'd be like a one and done. So it's really interesting and cool that your model is like fostering this like family or very much a community, right? Of repeat people that yeah, can reconnect later on in life as well. Very, very cool. I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. I mean, I become friends with like all of my guests, so I want to see
Yeah.
them again. And I mean,
Right.
I try to make that happen however possible. But yeah, we go to so many different places, so there's like so many choices, and I love it when people come back for new adventures with us.
Heck yeah. I love that. It's such a cool business model and just I love what you guys are doing. So yeah, thank you so much for coming on today, Carrie. I really appreciate it. And if you have, something later in the year that you want to promote or plug or whatnot, the door is always open for you to come back because I really enjoyed our conversation today. So thank you so much.
Cool. I would love that. Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.